to the Students and Families panel, the second of 2 days in a series of panel discussions with finalist candidates for Boston Public Schools as superintendent.
Superintendent.
Marcus McNeil,
Senior graduate.
at American University in the fall.
Sorry, I'm just gonna.
American University na Freetown.
I'm sorry, I'm just gonna stop. I'm sorry, 1 second, everyone. We just need all of the interpreters to make sure that you are in the English channel. So again, I'm sorry, I take that back. All of our interpreters, please make sure that you're in your respective channels so that we don't have two voices going in the English channel. So again, all interpreters, make sure that you're in your respective channels so we don't have two voices in English. Thank you. You can resume. Sorry about that.
No worries, thank you. So I'll start over. Welcome to the Students and Families panel, the second of 2 days in a series of panel discussions with finalist candidates for Boston Public Schools as superintendent. My name is Marcus McNeil, and I'm a graduating senior at Fenway High School and an incoming freshman at American University in the fall, as well as one of the co-chairs of the Superintendent Search Committee. We are offering interpretation today in 9 BPS languages. The interpretation feature has been turned on. Please note that everyone needs to join a channel, including English speakers. If you want to listen to the conversation in English, please join the English channel by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen. To support our ASL interpreters, please name yourself before speaking. Participants, please note that if you would like to have the ASL interpreter box larger, you can pin this panelist by clicking on the 3 buttons in the top right box and clicking pin. Today's meeting is being recorded to serve as a resource for school committee members and to make available for those who cannot be here today. To preserve the integrity of this process, the candidate is using a BPS issued laptop and is not allowed to refer to their phone during the panel interview. The Superintendent Search Committee has been tasked by the school committee to conduct a thorough search. Beginning with 34 candidates, the search committee narrowed the pool to 8 candidates throughout May and June and conducted several rounds of interviews with the candidates. On Friday, June 16th, the search committee conducted its final deliberations and voted to select a group of finalists for the school committee's consideration. 2 candidates have since withdrawn from the process prior to the start of public interviews. The 2 final candidates are Mary Skipper, Superintendent of Somerville Public Schools, and Dr. Tommy Welch, Region 1 School Superintendent at Boston Public Schools. Today's panel is with Dr. Tommy Welch. Before we get to the agenda, I'd like to briefly introduce members of our panel of students and families who will interview Dr. Welch. Participating this afternoon are Edith Bazelle, Eleanor DeRoche, Mario Fils, Marilyn Fitzgerald, Tanya Nixon-Silberg, Suhey Skinnell, and lastly, Reverend Chang Imtan. Each panelist has prepared a question, and I will mix panelist questions with questions from the public. We've drawn from the questions that many of you suggested at the public listening sessions and through the Superintendent Search Survey launched in March. We also invite you to submit your questions live using the Q&A function in Zoom at the bottom of your screen. We'll ask a limited number of live questions as time permits during our 90 minutes together. At this time, I invite Eleanor from our panelists to kick us off with the first panelist question.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eleanor DeRoche, and I'm a recent graduate of Tech Boston Academy. I wasn't very familiar with the job description of a superintendent, and so I did some more research into it. I found out that they oversee quite a lot of aspects of their school district, and being a superintendent is an intensely managerial position. Therefore, as a superintendent, how well equipped do you think you are at managing the many aspects of a large district like BPS in respect to things such as hiring, budgeting, developing plans for student success, and so much more?
Thank you, Eleanor, for the question. I appreciate it. Nice to meet you. And good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, so the position of superintendent, especially in a district as large as the Boston Public Schools, is a very complex and difficult job. I have been able to see how this job is managed firsthand, being a member of the central office team and on the executive team for the majority of my 7 years here. I've been able to see, listen, learn all along the way from three different superintendents. One of the things that I would like to connect to this question is my work as a regional superintendent in Region 1, which supports East Boston, Charlestown, and the North End. It is one of the largest regions in the district with 7,200 students, 700 teachers, 15 schools in those three neighborhoods. And just by the numbers, a region that big is larger than 95% of the school districts in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So although I haven't been at the helm of a district, I've been able to navigate and manage a very complex and large urban a network of schools. To your question about how well equipped do I think I'm at managing these many aspects, let's just take it to the role that I'm in right now. I have 15 schools, 15 very diverse, complex, different school communities. I also, as a regional school soup, have a team of support liaisons. I have a budget analyst. I have a human capital staffing specialist. I have a data specialist. I have a planning analysis team member, an operational leader, a special education specialist who have been working alongside me for many years. The one thing about this region, it is a very geographic region, and there hasn't been so much movement from the schools left, from year to year. And so the team we've been able to build, not only in the schools, but in the central office to support, have been very stable. To your question, how would I manage all of these things? Everyone knows that this is a very large organization, and just not one person can do the job alone. The school superintendent is supported by a team. As a superintendent, being able and available to start the job on July 1st, which is next Friday, I will need to ensure that the closest people next to me are people that I can trust, that I can build relationships with, because I'm not going to micromanage my finance team, my staffing team, my academics team. These people have been hired in these high-level positions because of their expertise and their experience. I will not manage this district from a balcony. I will be in their planning meetings. They will be with me. We will be working together, because each of these departments that are listed here in the question, as well as many other departments that have been called out in recent DESE reviews, such as special education, English learners, our support for transformation schools, all these departments are connected in the work that we do to support some of our most vulnerable student populations and our schools that need the most support. So what I'm saying to you today is I can't do it myself. I need to build a team on trust. I need to replicate the work that has been done in other parts of the city, as well as other districts, and deliver for the students and the parents of Boston Public Schools to rebuild that trust so we can move forward and become that district that we all want to be for the students, teachers, and parents of Boston.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for the question. This is Marcus speaking again. Next up, we have Edith Bazelle.
Thank you so much, Marcus. Good afternoon, Dr. Welch. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
And I have a couple of questions for you, one question and a follow-up. That's okay. My name is Edith Bazelle. I am a BPS graduate, a BPS parent. I spent 32 years as a teacher and a district-wide administrator in BPS. I'm also currently the grandmother of Lily, who is 9 years old and who attends the Mary Lyons School. Lily has autism, so special ed is very close to my heart, and I'm glad that you brought that up multiple times. My question for you, Dr. Welch, is what key measures would you use to monitor academic progress across the district, and what systems would you put in place to hold your team accountable and the district accountable to making progress?
Thank you for your question, Edith. I really appreciate it. And you said you're going to ask a follow-up question. I'll give you 10 follow-up questions if we had time. I believe that leading with data is how we're going to move the district forward. As a principal, that's how I led my school. As a teacher, that's how I met my goals. I understood where I was on a 6-week cycle with our students through formative assessments. Data is just part of the job, and measuring it and setting goals and seeing if we are meeting those goals and adjusting if we need to is an important aspect of what we do system-wide. The key measures, I think there's many, and we could get as detailed as we want, and we could come up with an entire list of data that we need to measure within special ed. Just for example, from compliance to actual student growth to performance. We could say the same thing of English learners. There's several state laws in place to ensure that we are monitoring the success of our English learners, not only academically, but their progress beyond once they reclassify as English proficient. It's a state law that we need to monitor them for 4 years. So to be able to weigh which measures are really important for us to know if we are as a department moving forward in the right fashion, but also adhering to the state laws that are guiding our work. One of the things you mentioned in your question was about holding the district accountable to progress. I think I said this earlier in another meeting. The data needs to be understandable and digestible to all stakeholders in Boston. I mean, we have so many data sets that I look at and I have to pull them from here and there. At the end of the day, if there is 1 or 2 data measures that we could show the public to indicate how we are doing in special education, for example, percentages of IEPs that are in compliance, or percentage of students who are meeting their given needs, the minutes of instruction for support for English learners, same thing. If the students are not getting their minutes, we have to know how are we going to get into compliance. Other data outside of instruction, transportation on a daily basis, we need to be able to publicly share how many students were not dropped off to school on time, not within 15 minutes, on time, because these things contribute to another data set that we need to share, chronic absenteeism. If we're not getting kids to school on time, I guarantee you the chronic absenteeism numbers are going to be correlated to that. And so there's a whole bunch of things that we can look at, but my point is holding people accountable, I think, is making this data visible and public to everybody. And one of the things that I proposed is working with our data team to create a dashboard that is easily understandable from the top person in special ed to my neighbor, who we talk about education all the time, but sometimes he tells me to stop. I'm talking over his head because I don't work in education. He's a smart guy, but sometimes I'm saying stuff that doesn't really resonate with him. If there's a way that we could get a snapshot for each of the major departments, and I named a couple, there's probably several others, so folks can see how we are doing as a district on a daily, weekly basis, and how are we progressing, or what areas we need to put extra support to take care of. That's something I'd be committed to as I move forward as a superintendent.
Well, one thing Dr. Welch said, is very close to my heart and I'm very passionate about is the fact that we leave Black and Latinx students behind. And often they're placed in special education. And we stigmatize them by labeling them as students with disability, but we don't recognize their gifts and their talents. My point is that we have students with disabilities, Black and Latinx, who are also gifted and talented, and are also English learners. And so would you provide an example of what you would do to make sure that these students have a pathway to accelerated learning while their unique intersectionality of being Black and Latinx, having a disability, being gifted and talented are also recognized?
I won't give you an example of what I will do. I'll give you an example of what I did do. As a middle school principal, the first year we had a separate program. We opened a brand new school and it just didn't sit right with me and my other administrators. We had a team of special educators who were pushing co-teaching and inclusion. That first year, all we did during PD was support our staff to understand how we support exceptional learners in the mainstream classrooms, the least restricted environment. That second year, we took 10 separate classrooms, put every single one of the students into the general education population with a very strategic plan of who needs support for what subjects and when. The example I want to give you is my student, Kevin Monchis. He's an ABA strand student in this system, it'd be called ABA. Brilliant in math, one of our math wizards, right? But had struggles with communication, literacy, reading and writing. when we went to the high school, he was in 9th grade in our honors geometry class without support. The teacher that was in the classroom was the teacher that came up with us from the 8th grade. I don't know if you know my history, but we opened a middle school and then a high school. He was in a more restricted environment based off of his needs for the other subjects. But the 2 periods a day that he was in geometry, that was his super strength, and we elevated it. And this is what I'm saying, I think you're getting at, is we have to be able to find, equity is based off of the needs, but also the strengths of our students. He needed that to thrive. And it didn't just help him academically, it helped him social emotionally. And even though he was in that top class or whatever you want to call it, he became part of that class where everybody stuck up for him. Everybody understood the subtleties of Kevin, and he was our superstar. So I hope that answers your question. I want to do that district-wide, and I want to promote that to all of our school leaders who are working with students with disabilities and English learners.
I truly appreciate the specificity of that answer in that example. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you, Edith.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This is Marcus speaking again. Next up, we're going to take a question from the public submitted anonymously through our superintendent search survey. The question is, what plans do you have to address mental health for students with special needs?
Well, thank you for that question. It's a great question. I would like to take just even one step back. I think that at this time, as we are returning from the twin pandemics, and now we're a year back to normalcy, or essentially normalcy, we are seeing the effects of what happened in 2020, 2021. I don't necessarily think it should be just pigeonholed to mental health supports for students with special needs. That is part of it, but I would also include other students, all students, adults, parents. You see scenarios unfolding before us on a weekly basis. One of the schools I support is Charlestown High School. We had some challenging moments in May involving firearms found on campus, as well as I'm sure you all heard about the original scheduled graduation last Monday, where the school also experienced gun violence. This is not like because of one thing, it's because of many things. I do believe that we are a long ways away from fully recovering or getting to a more stable, I don't know how you would describe it, but a less high intensity state of needing mental health support. How would I address it? There are tons of organizations, universities who have programs of students studying how to support students within the city of Boston. During the pandemic, when we were on remote learning time, and Marcus, I'm sure you remember this, there was like a no partnership policy because we were scared, we're going to spread coronavirus. That kind of crushed these small schools, in particular in my network, who really relied on partners to get the job done. And so as we returned and we lifted the partnership ban, rethinking and recommitting ourselves to inviting people into our buildings and how we work with folks, I think is a big task for me as the new superintendent moving forward, ensuring that everybody knows that, yes, we can't do this alone. We need to welcome our partners from outside, especially with the mental health issues that we're facing in our district today.
Awesome, I appreciate that. So this is Marcus speaking again. Next up, we have Tanya Nixon-Silberg for her question.
Hello, good afternoon. Yeah, so my name is Tanya Nixon-Silberg, and as I did yesterday with Mary Skipper, I want to start with who I am. So my name is Tanya Nixon-Silberg. I'm a parent of a child attending the Mendel Elementary School, and I want to talk a little bit about the vetting process for this panel. We were told to be nice. We were told to ask a nice question, and I know that striving for niceness makes us all complicit in the systems in which we are trying to sort of dig ourselves out of. But I want us to actually have a true and even leveled partnership, which makes us accomplices. And so I look forward, should you go on to be the BPS superintendent, for all of us to be accomplices together. So here are my questions. There's a two-part. As a Black woman who was involved with the schools, first as an alumna and a grand alumna, my mom was as well. She was a part of the desegregation of Boston. And now a parent of a BPS student, I'm utterly in awe of the leadership and fierce advocacy of Black women for our children. Recently in the superintendent search, 2 women of color left the process. This is alarming and it's ringing a lot of bells for a lot of people. How will you actively be responsive to the parent leadership and advocacy of women of color, specifically Black women? And before you answer, I want you to talk a little bit more, not so much about the data gathering and listening sessions and things of that sort, but actual actions that you can take.
Got it. So thank you for the question. And first, I want to recognize you bring up several good points, especially with the limited slew of candidates that we have in this final round. I am part of the final round, and I still hope that you consider me as a true candidate for our district. And I will ensure that I will lift up and elevate as many leaders of color as I can into our organization. But to address this more specifically, some of your questions, looking at schools as far as bringing in families, and I think you're particularly targeting women leaders of color into the schools. I know that schools that I would consider of having high participation and parents on leadership councils, taking leadership, it's not nearly as high as you would expect based off of the number of students we have in our schools. And it always makes me wonder, like a school that feels like they're having great participation with their parent leaders. And I'm not just talking about, school site council or school leadership council. I'm talking about other leadership roles, such as very important roles like school hiring committee, right? This is a very important decision, a very powerful team on the schools when you're basically determining the future of your students' leadership for could be 10 years. I do want to go back to the tremendous investments that we put into place in the schools over the last couple of years under Dr. Caselius' leadership. We're talking about the social work investment, the family liaison investment that has basically expanded to every single school, not only as like a part-time position in several of my smaller schools. I remember the first year these investments came out, there would be like one person supporting a school 2 days here and 3 days here. Now we have them at every single school, no matter how big or how small. And the benefit of having those positions is their direct responsibility, not only to engage with parents, but to empower and lift parents into leadership roles on the school site councils and to decision-making councils, such as the hiring committee that I mentioned. I think that we have this investment, and this is with a lot of things in our district over the years. We came up with a great idea, came up with a great policy, but we haven't necessarily implemented to the T coherently across the entire district. And I do see schools leveraging this position to engage with families, to empower families, particularly families of parents of color, to bring them their presence on school to help lead the schools. But it's not consistent across the district. So what I'm saying is we have the investment, we have the people. We need to coherently and consistently implement what we want from these positions to move the work forward. As far as I think what you're getting at is the lack of openness to bring women, people of color, women of color, and I think you particularly called out Black women of color into leadership roles, not only within the district, but in the schools, on our councils. If through these clear trainings and clear understandings of the roles and responsibilities of our family liaisons, if it is still not happening, and we know it is not happening in some of our schools, I think we need to address it straight on. And, we could call it, looking at the anti-Blackness that has been in Boston for decades, but continually exists in some of our schools. If we have these resources in place, how are we holding people like me, our regional school superintendents or principals, to address the issue head on instead of skirt around it? You told me to stay away from data and things like that, but one of the things that I like to think of is if the school experience is not working for our Black students, it is not working for all of our students. And if the school experience is not working for our Black parents, it is not working for all of our parents. And so knowing that my expertise for 5 of the 7 years has been largely in East Boston, my region also includes Charlestown and North End. It's a large region, 7,200 students, but it's in one corner of the city. 2 of the years I did citywide work, once with alternative education and the high school network, and the other as the associate soup working on citywide initiatives. I did get exposure to neighborhoods across the city. I met several key partners, I call them power brokers, who I befriended and I could call at any moment's notice for advice, to push my thinking. These are people like Robert Lewis, Ron Dorsey, Sam Acevedo. Like, these are folks that I turn to, and those are the men. I think that also looking at the women, right? We just had Edith on the call.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And Edith and I have engaged. I don't ever turn down a meeting. Sometimes it happens sooner than later. I think with her it was really quickly, but I welcome the conversation to understand. And at least in my short time with my short relationship with Edith, I'm going to use her as the power broker in certain aspects of the district, just like I
think I think that's amazing. But what I'm thinking about are the people that you don't know. We're thinking about this table that we're around and you're inviting people to it, but I don't like what you're serving, right? So how are you going to get me there? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but I was just using them as an example to start that conversation, because I know that there are people across the city who are those people who I don't even know. Yeah. These are just the relationships that I've built very recently, as well as through the last 7 years, that are going to help me get there. When I first came here in East Boston, I literally just walked around the streets trying to get to know people. I met, I call her a power broker, La Madrina, Elsa Flores, and she didn't know me. I didn't know her, but she got me into all the folks that need to get in East Boston. That's what I need to happen across the entire city as a superintendent of Boston Public Schools.
I think that would be great and amazing, and make sure that if it's regular people that are coming to the table, they're coming not just at the school level, but actually at the district levels. Like, if you're inviting folks in, you are really inviting folks in.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Alrighty, perfect. Thank you. Next up, we have Marilyn Fitzgerald.
My name is Marilyn Fitzgerald, and I'm a student at the Henderson K-12 Inclusion School. I've been on an IEP for 15 years to support my needs. I'm currently in the transition program at the Henderson School. What will you do to make sure that my peers and I will continue to have our needs met as we prepare for independent living?
Marilyn, it's a pleasure to meet you. I've never met you in person. I hope to do that someday soon. But your question is a great one. One of the years, even though I did work primarily in Region 1, sometimes we get different schools that come in and out depending on the changes of the regional structure. One of the years I worked with the Carter School, and Principal Mark O'Connor, who's an amazing leader over there. At his school, every single student is in a transitional plan. And I got to see it firsthand leading up to the transition moment and learning about what happens after the moment. Mark is an amazing leader who guided me through that, even as his supervisor, because this is something that was relatively new for me. But to address your question, I think that the proactive approach to meeting with the families, there are structures in place through our special education IEP process of transition meetings. We need to be really tight and understand that everybody needs to understand the plan before we get to this 22nd birthday. Leading up to it, we got to make sure that through our public or our private placements, we understand that this person is turning 22 on this date. Are we ready for the support to bring folks in? And if we're not, what are we going to do about it? Not just this month, because it's going to happen this month, but 3 years in advance. We know that students in these programs are going to transition well ahead of time. What are we doing to make sure that our partners outside of BPS are prepared with the appropriate number of placement seats, so all of our students get the support, not only during the last years of BPS, but beyond?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Reverend Cheng Im Tan.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Reverend Cheng Im Tan. I'm a long-term advocate in the diverse communities. I was the founding director of what is currently known as the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement. I'm also a parent at the Josiah Quincy Upper School and the Elliott, and co-chair of the Diversity of diversity at the Citywide Parent Council. So as you may have seen from the parent surveys, responses in the Superintendent Search Survey show consistent emphasis placed on honesty and transparency, as well as empowering and engaging parents, guardians, students, and other stakeholders. When you look at the student demographics in the district, what can you deduce about who BPS parents are, the level of parent understanding of the BPS system, and the level and the different levels of parent participation? Got it?
Okay, so thank you very much.
Wait.
Oh, wait.
That's the second part. And what are 3 strategies you can commit to, including budgetary commitments to ensure robust parent participation from the diverse parent communities, as well as involvement at all levels?
All right, I don't have that question written down, so I shorthanded it a little bit. But thank you for your very detailed, complex, multi-tiered question. And if I miss one, please call me out of this. I love looking at survey data. I love looking at the demographics of our district. I think that's just how regional superintendents or principals are programmed. Like data kind of drives how we move. The disparities between what we see in the demographics as far as our students in the district, and even things as simple as participation rates is one thing that's alarming to me. And we've done several surveys throughout the year, not just climate surveys, but with the coronavirus return and all this other stuff. The responses are alarming that they don't meet the ratios that we see or the percentage that we see in our district. I really think, and I'm going to go back to how we know our schools, and you're at 2 schools, the Josiah Quincy Upper School, as well as the Elliott, where I know for sure, I was with the Josiah Quincy for several months when I was with the high school team, but at the Elliott, they almost have communication overload. And if they don't get, they have 100% goals all the time. And if they don't get the 100%, they know exactly which parents aren't responding, and they push and they push and they push. Not in a kind of irritating negative way, but like, hey, we need your feedback because this is going to shape how we are going to move the programming, how we're going to move the instructional focus for our schools. And it's not just the Elliott, there's other schools that do great jobs like that in my network. The 100% goal for participation is real. You see it in our classrooms. We want, if teachers have any sort of initiative to bring in students in for student-led parent conferences, you don't want just 80% of the students coming in to do, because you got 4 students kind of left out. So I think across the board, we could do a better job. I think it is a local issue at schools where me as a superintendent can push the expectation. And this goes back a little bit to my last response, where we do have resources in place. Are we using them effectively? Are they getting the jobs done that we are asking them to do? If they are the advocate, and I think you mentioned the word empowerment voice of our parents, like if the job's not getting done, we got to find out why. All right. Did I answer those first 3 questions? Because I think I'm going to go into strategies.
Sort of, I was trying to get at sort of your understanding of who the parents are, how diverse they are, as well as the different barriers and challenges that prevent involvement.
I got it.
So you can come up with the strategies.
Yeah, so I'll address that in the strategies. We can't treat the district as just one in many aspects. And I think this is one. We are 23 different neighborhoods. And even within the different neighborhoods, there's different parts of neighborhoods. Like in East Boston, there's 4 different neighborhoods. The 4 different neighborhoods are relatively similar, but you can hear what I'm saying. I'm trying to say that in different parts of the city, there's different strategies to engage folks to stress the importance of participating in schools. I mentioned in an earlier question, like in East Boston, my goal was to walk to every single restaurant in, community-based organization and just introduce myself. That kind of on the ground, hands-on touch really worked with my Latino, my Latinx community. Whereas some may be more engaged into the media, print media or radio media. Other parts of the city, I know that some of the key influencers are faith-based community leaders, which I am really interested in learning about how it looks like outside of the schools that I've been wholeheartedly focused on for the majority of my time in Boston Public Schools. When I was in Los Angeles, opened 2 schools. That was my way in through all the churches. That was the way in. That's how we did it. Churches and after school programs is how we got the participation. Strategies, I think I mentioned one of them already, just really elevating the accountability that we need to put in the systems that we have in place. I think that understanding these concerns that you bring up and understanding what we need to do as a team to empower these new positions, relatively new positions that aren't going to go away because they're part of the baseline budget. This is not ESSER investments. These are going to be part of the fabric of every single school for years to come. Are we getting the return on investment of these positions? And if not, how are we increasing the amount of participation? Ideally, we'd like 100% participation from all families across the district. But I think that those are at least 2 or 3 strategies I would implore in the very beginning, especially working with our family engagement teams to get this done.
Do I have more time?
Yeah, go ahead. I got time. I'm not going anywhere.
Oh, I'm not sure if I'm out of time. Oh, 1 minute warning.
Yep, you're good.
So,
Go ahead.
okay, so maybe a quick question. Different communities will have different needs. There'll be different priorities depending on the communities. And sometimes these needs could be competing needs. How would you handle those different voices with different priorities from different neighborhoods on the same issue that affects everyone?
I mean, I think it doesn't happen just between different neighborhoods. It happens within school communities. I mean, I've been in dogfights with school communities over, we want SEI, keep the kids separate, and then we want students included because that's the best way to learn English. There's a constant battle between people who have differing ideas for what's best with their students. We could back up to September this year when we came back to school and the whole testing protocols. I had parents that said, we don't want our kids tested. We don't want it. Coronavirus doesn't exist. And I had parents arguing in the same day of not only wanting to test every single person on the campus, but publishing the test results, right? So those conflicts happen all the time. As in that last example, I sat on the schoolyard. I talked to the families that were, very emotional about this. Let them understand where we are as far as the school policy, the guidance from, in this case, the Public Health Commission. So everyone understands the emotion is one part of it, but this is the guidance. This is what we're doing right now. Can we tweak it and make it better moving forward? But yes, we can't solve the problem just yelling at each other from both ends of the argument. So I know that doesn't answer your question all the way, but really what I was trying to impress upon you was like, I'm ready for these conversations. And I know that as a superintendent, it's probably going to come 10 times faster than when it comes to me as a regional school superintendent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Awesome. Thank you. I want to remind everyone that we welcome you to submit live Q&A questions using the Q&A feature in Zoom. We'll read as many of these questions as we can get to at the end of today's session. And next up, we're going to take another question from the public survey. The question is, how can we update our aging school facilities without also putting school communities through the trauma of closure?
This is a really great question. I appreciate the community member asking it. In my experience as both a school leader in Los Angeles and a systems level leader in Boston, I've experienced both school closures and school openings, as well as school mergings. In Los Angeles, we had a bond-funded measure, $25 billion over 18-year period. We constructed or extensively remodeled 135 schools, including one of the school buildings that I moved into. To move the school district forward at that pace with that many new buildings, we know that change is inevitable. And there are going to be new versions of schools that people are emotionally attached to. We haven't done it at quite the pace here in Boston, but I was heavily involved with the school closure of the Edwards Middle School building. And I think that the question is really getting at how do we update it without really causing more stress of this change. And one of the ways in both examples of me opening that new school in Los Angeles, as well as closing down the Edwards and thinking about the plan moving forward. First of all, it's an entire team that helps with this planning. And I may have been the face of it or the first person that people could come engage with and yell at or talk about it with. But the one thing that I think to reduce the trauma of a significant change like this is being able to map out a multi-year plan and clearly denote benchmarks of when things are going to happen, hold ourselves accountable to do it. In the case of the Edwards, I remember it was the first month that I was here, that staff was asking me, is our school going to close? I heard that there was a strategy to reduce and eventually eliminate the number of middle schools in favor of K-8s or K-6, 7, 12. But I hadn't been part of those conversations. When it became real that it was gonna happen, it wasn't like, hey, we just finished budget season and next year you're gonna be closed, right? We announced it. 2 years later, we planned to take off the 6th grade from their enrollment. So they gradually were phasing out. By that time, teachers that I worked with were actually moving on to other schools within my network, and quite a few actually went to high schools across the city. But this gradual transition of the school allowed not only the students and the parents to understand, look, at this school is closing. I don't want to enroll in a school that's closing. It allowed the staff members to find other options over time with the support of us and our team. But in this long-term plan for transitioning the schools, at the same time, we also expanded 6th grade offerings in other elementary schools. So at the same time, we closed off 6th grade, we opened up 6th grade in other parts of the city, which was a great transition for the rising 5th graders going to 6th, but also the teachers who taught 6th grade. So long story short, I think that to reduce the amount of trauma, people are going to be emotional when the school that their grandmother and their mom and now they and all their cousins are going to are going to close because there's historical memory and knowledge and just tradition in the schools that we are going to eventually close. But we have to make these tough decisions if we're going to make the school district move forward, if we're going to get the school district to move forward. And all news, bad news, good news, as long as we give enough time to have people transition and make decisions, informed decisions based off of a timeline that we're going to stick to, I think that'll help them minimize the trauma that we're going to experience as we transition our district.
Awesome. Thank you for that. This is Marcus again. Next up, we have Suhey Skinel, who will be speaking in Spanish. If you are in the English channel, you will hear live interpretation in just a moment. So Suhey, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Hola, buenas tardes. Gracias. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Eugenia Scanel. Mi primera pregunta para usted es, primero, si habla español o habla otro idioma.
Sí, yo hablo español. Todos mis años enseñando en Los Ángeles. Yo enseñé clases de estudiantes en elementary school que están aprendiendo inglés. Cuando estaba en high school, lo mismo, yo enseñé inglés como segundo idioma. Cuando yo tengo todas mis juntas y conferencias con padres, es en español porque 95% de mis estudiantes hablan español como su primer idioma. Cuando estaba un director de la secundaria y de la preparatoria, todas de mis juntas comunitarias con padres están en los dos idiomas porque esa es mi población. 95% español, latino en Los Ángeles, 5%.
5%.
Do we need to translate that? Oh, wait, yeah, oh, wait. I don't know how to do the...
Sí, porque para hablar español debe de irse al canal español, para inglés mantenerse. Pero muchas gracias por su...
¿El resto de la respuesta en inglés o español?
No, está bien. Muchas gracias por su aclaración. Pero me parece que para lo técnico, para poder responderles y que todos los que no hablan español le puedan escuchar, tiene que responder en el canal de...
El resto de nuestro tiempo está en inglés.
Ok, gracias.
Sí, perfecto. Okay, gracias.
Está bien. Muchas gracias. Bueno, mi nombre es Suhey Chanel, soy madre de 3 niños. Mi hija va a la escuela Herley. actualmente está finalizando, bueno, hoy, el lunes es su último día de tercer grado y bueno, muchas gracias. Lo primero que le quiero decir es que Boston es una ciudad multicultural, multirracial, multilingüal. Es por eso que en la importancia de que la superintendencia sea dirigida por un líder que tenga como sus prioridades, una de ellas, a los aprendices del idioma inglés. Soy una madre aprendiz del idioma inglés y para mí y para la comunidad es un tema primordial a tratar para la nueva administración. Me gustaría que, basado en su experiencia, me cuente, por favor, una historia de algo que le haya pasado, o sea, una historia suya con los aprendices del idioma inglés o hablantes de hablantes de otras lenguas. ¿Cómo ha establecido relaciones e incluido a estudiantes y familiares que no hablan inglés con fluidez, o sea, que no es su primer idioma el inglés? ¿Qué lecciones específicas de estas experiencias formarán parte de su trabajo en Boston Public School?
Okay.
Okay.
Am I gonna get some coaching here?
Yeah,
So,
I'm gonna go ahead and can you hear me?
yeah.
No, okay. Boston is a multicultural, multiracial, multilingual city, which is why it is so important that the Boston Public School.
Either Marianella or Jennery come to the English channel and just give us an interpretation of the last couple of minutes, please, again, on the English channel. Either Jennery or Marianella. Yes, we can hear you. We can't hear you in the English channel, so come to the English channel, and then you can interpret what was being said.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Boston is a multicultural, multiracial, and multilingual city, which is why it is so important that the Boston Public Schools be led by a leader who has English language learners as one of their priorities. As a mother learning the English language, I feel that it is one of the main issues to be addressed by a new administration, since good communication is vital for a good relationship and understanding. Tell a specific story about your experience with English language learner and English for speakers of other languages program. How have you built relationships and included students and family members who are not fluent in English? What specific lessons from these experiences would shape your work at Boston Public Schools?
Okay. So su primer oración en esta pregunta es una descripción de mi hogar. Dice multicultural, multiracial, multilingüe. Esa es mi casa. You want me to do this in English or Spanish, Jelani?
You can respond in Spanish first, and then just relay your answer in English to follow, so everybody can hear what was being discussed and what was being asked.
Okay, so la pregunta es mi experiencia con desarrollando programas para los estudiantes que están aprendiendo inglés, pero también para ayudar a los padres. Yo estoy pensando en una historia cuando yo estaba una subdirector, ¿cómo se llama? Un coordinador bilingüe en Los Ángeles. Es como una posición aquí, se llama LATF. Es la persona que apoya los maestros y los estudiantes.
I was thinking about a program in, oh no. I think you should say it in English and then I would have to translate in Spanish like that. I won't.
Do you want me to do both?
No.
So hey, it's up to you. Do you want to know if I can speak Spanish? Oh, si quieres, yo puedo hablar español o si está bien.
Yo me siento más cómoda en español porque es mi lengua, pero tengo también traducción. Si veo que tiene mucha destreza en el español y eso me gusta, pero si por el equipo completo es preferible que usted hable en inglés, entonces estaría bien para no incidentar el programa.
Okay, solamente si usted promete a visitar conmigo para hablar más en español, okay?
Muchas gracias.
I'm gonna switch to English now, if that's okay. Is all the translation or interpretation hooked up? So I was beginning the story. Suhei was asking for an example, specific example that would demonstrate my commitment to English language learners and as a systems level leader and experiences that shaped my vision for how we would support our English language learners, but also the families of our English language learners. I started out by saying the example that first came to mind was when I was a bilingual coordinator at a high school in Los Angeles. This was probably 2008 or 2009. I served the school to support our multilingual learners. In this case, the school was about 2,800 students. 1,900 of those students were classified as English language learners. So imagine 1,900 students in one high school classified as English language learners. It was my job to work all the compliance, do all the testing, assessment, but on top of that, to support the teachers in the ESL classrooms as our students also transition into English classes. The story that comes to mind is one year, we had a tremendous enrollment increase in our brand new students from Central America and Mexico. It was mid-year, and it was so much that we had to open an additional section in ESL 1. And these students, they were the greatest kids ever because they came in the middle of the year and they wanted to stay after school and they wanted to do Saturday program. But what came to like very clear, our older learners, they had a shorter window to graduate. And so a lot of these students, they were coming from El Salvador and Mexico, and they said, we want, credit acceleration, credit recovery, knowing that a lot of the classes they were taking didn't count towards graduation until they got to a certain level of English. And so as a bilingual coordinator, we couldn't possibly.
Toda hora sai, não sei o quê.
So as
Como uma pessoa que fala duas línguas,
I think somebody's on right now.
é impossível.
I think it's.
I'm sorry. One second. Fatima, make sure you're back on the Portuguese channel, please. Sorry, Tom, you can continue.
Yeah, so.
I don't know what happened. I'm getting disconnected and back again automatic. I don't know why this is going on.
I'm gonna reconnect you right now.
Okay, please.
Yep.
I was connected 5 times so far. You did already?
Are we good? Oh,
okay?
Yes, yes, you can continue and she'll continue on once the channel's up. Go ahead, Tommy.
Okay, cool. So the students came to me and said, we need help. We want more classes. We couldn't have any more classes a day. And at that time, I was working very closely with our adult school. We had an adult school. Our school was basically open from 10 p.m. And what I did is I registered myself.
Excuse me, Tommy, 1 second. So Fatima, so you just need to accept the Portuguese channel.
I'm getting disconnected all the time. I don't know what's going on.
I mean, you can go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so the solution we came to was, look, I'll enroll myself as an ESL teacher for acceleration class. I think it was a combination ESL 1 and 2, just to give them the extra time so they could begin to access the credit-bearing classes in the next year. We went to adult school. As a bilingual coordinator, I taught adult school before, registered myself as a class. We had 25 students register right away. The interesting thing was a lot of our adults in the neighborhood, they go to the adult school to learn English. Of those 25 students, only 20 of them were my students. 5 of them were their parents. So imagine going to school with your parent in the evening. But that would be an example of, number one, helping a students solving a problem that they brought to the table, specifically with students who are learning English, who wanted to accelerate their English so they would be able to graduate on time. But number 2, including the parents into the process. And that's something that I think I'm very proud of. Over the years, I stayed involved with the adult program, the evening school, for several years. And I made some very good relationships with the families, and it actually helped me do my job better because part of it was family engagement. And so they saw me as someone who would go that extra mile for them. Now bringing it back to my role as a superintendent. Suhei, I know you know, I support East Boston High School. East Boston is a neighborhood. It's one of the largest populations of Latinos in Boston. My network has the highest percentage of English language learners. This is what we do. Every single school has students that are learning English. We know the value and the importance of making sure that our students are reading and writing and listening and speaking in English, but also at the same time maintaining their home language, in this case, in East Boston, especially Spanish. One of the things that I saw as a teacher and as a principal, as our students become more comfortable speaking English, sometimes they turn to preferring to speak only English, which actually alienates family members like moms and dads who may not be proficient in English. So really being aware of that dynamic, I think it begs us as a district to be responsible and ensure that our students know that when they graduate bilingual, my wife, she's Guatemalan. She works in a high school. She tells the students all the time, go get your biliteracy seal, because graduating high school proficient in 2 languages actually nearly guarantees you a job in today's market. I hear her say it on the phone all the time at nighttime when she's talking to her students. So really emphasizing the importance of maintaining your culture, your home language. And it's not just through adult school or after hour learning, or even through our ESL programs. I think we could do a lot better job with offering summer programs that are specific to cultural studies. In East Boston, we have Veronica Robles. She's from Mexico and she runs a dance program. We've partnered with her several times, but her summer program is all about teaching the students about their culture through dance. And if we could expand that, I mean, I know teaching culture through dance and arts is completely different than I think the original part of your question, but it is connected. And it is something that I would be committed to as the next school leader of Boston Public Schools. Did I answer your question? ¿Necesitas más, Sujei?
Oh, sí, muchas gracias. Y apoyándome en lo que su esposa le comentó del segundo lenguaje de inglés. Sí, usted sabe que aquí en la ciudad de Boston, como le dije, al ser tan, como usted definió su hogar, que es multicultural, multisexual, multilingüal, está la ley LUC que fue aprobada en el año 2017, que es para la alfabetización en su idioma nativo. Entonces, queremos que en una nueva superintendencia sea, perdón, disculpa, en una nueva superintendencia este sea un punto neurálgico, o sea un punto fuerte.
It's very important.
Yeah.
Like you explained to me in regards to dance. Thank you and good luck.
I would love, yo quiero hablar más de la nueva ley. Yo tengo muchas ideas para crecer nuestro equipo de maestros.
I would love to speak about, I'm sorry.
What am I doing? I would love to speak with you more about my ideas for how we can use the law to actually increase, number one, the support for our students of other languages who have other home language, but number two, to use people like our paraprofessionals to develop their teaching skills to eventually be the next teachers in Boston Public Schools. So bringing the support in that we're allowed to through the Look Act, but also using it as a longer term strategy to increase our teaching force.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Mario Fils.
Hi, my name is Mario Fils, and I'm a student from New Mission High School. My question for you today is what motivated you to be a superintendent? I also have a follow-up question.
All right. Thank you, Mario. It's nice to meet you. You said New Mission High School? You gotta tell Mr. Thomas I said hello. We spent a good amount of time together. So what motivated me to be a superintendent? I would like to modify it a little bit because a lot of my colleagues who I love are motivated to be a superintendent. I'm not motivated to be a superintendent. I'm motivated to be the superintendent of Boston Public Schools. And that's the only school district I would do it for. And the reason why is because to do this job, I would only want to do it in a city that I was emotionally and physically connected to. You've probably heard me say this in other interviews, but this is a very hard job. And I would only do it for a city that I cared so much about, a city that both my wife and I have dedicated our careers, a city that we have entrusted our own children into the public school system. It doesn't make sense for me to go after some, a smaller district outside the city, because what's my connection to the city? And I would never move my students, my own children, a kindergarten student and a second grade student, out of their classroom, out of their school community that they have grown to love over the last couple of years. And so that's the first thing. I want to be the next Boston Public Schools superintendent because I have seen in the last 7 years all the great things. I understand the challenges, and we need to move this district forward, not only for my two children who are at elementary school in our neighborhood, but for their classmates, all the schools, all the classrooms in their school, but also for your school, which is down at the old Hyde Park High School, and working with people like Will Thomas to actually bring the experience that he's had over the years to amplify the work that's being done at the New Mission High School. I am committed to this district. My children are young. I already said we're not going to move. I can't do that to them. I am ready. One of the job descriptions, I clearly remember a moment where I talked to my wife and I said, hey, maybe we should do this. I put the job description right next to my resume, and we did this like crosswalk thing to say, do I have this? Do I have this? Do I have this? And because the description matched a lot of the characteristics and skills that I had, I said, yeah, you know what? Maybe I should try to do this. The other important thing is we are a district in transition, and a district in transition can't wait for the next leader. I took my family vacation a couple of weeks ago. I have nothing scheduled through the rest of the summer. I think my next weekend off is going to be in February or something like that. I'm ready to hit the ground running, which is something that you heard Mayor Wu say several times. You hear the descriptions from the community listening sessions. We need someone that can hit the ground running, that understands the school system, that can start on day one. And I said earlier, day one is July 1st. That's next Friday. 7 days from now, I will be ready to lead this district. And I've been in every single school building except for 10 in the district. And so I don't need to spend time going around the entire city to walk the buildings and understand where they are and understand which community centers are close to the buildings. In 10 schools, 5 of those 10 schools I haven't visited have summer programs. Summer programming starts in about a week and a half. I could visit those schools during summer programming, which will lead to only 5 schools to visit when school's in session. I know the city, I know the team, I know the community partners, and I just want to roll my sleeves up, get going. I don't want to miss a beat because this school district needs to move forward, and I feel like I am the right person to do it.
All right. My follow-up question was, how would you ensure that students' voices are also being heard?
I think there are multiple ways to bring student voices at the table, but also to make the key part of that question was heard, right? We've gone through several versions of how the executive team members work with BSAC. That's one way to engage with 30 students. I remember one year, each of us paired up with a leader of BSAC, and we would work with them. My partner was Elvis. I know everyone remembers Elvis because he lived in East Boston and I lived in East Boston, and he would be kind of the advocate for the students at his school. We would talk about it, but that's just one way to do it. I think that in today's age, where we have access to what we're doing right now, Zoom, or many of the other platforms that you probably use in your classroom, there's ways to elevate student voice, not only the high school voice, but our 6th graders have stuff to say. My 2nd grader has stuff to say. So really thinking about what it looks like to get a more clear picture of more voices is something I would love. I would love to continue working with our BSAC team. I worked very closely with Abraham Osorio when he was here. And I would like to re-engage that work and I think that the pandemic kind of like paused things for me a little bit, but just to get back into it because I was a high school guy. I love hanging out with the high school folks at BSAC. And I just want to get it going. I want to listen. I want to be there, and I want to act on what your suggestions are. Even chocolate milk. I heard chocolate milk was a big thing.
Thank you. And be sure to tell Mr. Thomas I said hi too.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Next up, we're going to take another question from the public submitted anonymously through our superintendent search survey. So the question is, how are you going to fix BPS bus transportation?
So BPS bus transportation is probably one of the, first of all, it's one of the largest budget line items in our district. I don't think one person can fix it alone. I know Dell and our operations team have been digging into it the entire spring, getting ready for how we're going to implement the stipulations within the new contract that was just signed with the bus drivers in the last month or so. One of the big things that I want to, I hope this added accountability will make sure that our students arrive on time. I know in the contract, or one of our goals is the percentage of students who arrive within 15 minutes of start time. I think it should be, that goal should be arriving 15 minutes before start time, because everyone knows the grab and go breakfast, the getting settled in, we want our kids to be in their seats when school actually starts. Arriving 15 minutes late, that's acceptable. It's actually probably 30 minutes until they actually start learning, right? And so you miss a lot. Add up missing 30 minutes every single day for an entire year, you're probably missing 90 hours of instruction, which is in many cases a whole week, right? No, not even a whole week, more than a week, right? So thinking about what we can do to push the efficiencies to get our students on time. The other thing that I really want to address is the amount of burden that it puts on our office staff to manage the late buses, the missing buses, the buses that bring kids to school, but then they cancel out the routes in the afternoon. So you get stranded kids. I don't know how many times my wife has taken people from East Boston all the way to Brighton. And it's not just her, it's her and another adult, because that's the way we got to do it, with 3 kids basically taking a 3-hour round trip. It's not fair to our staff. A lot of our single building administrators have to wear this responsibility that takes them away from their duty of managing their school, focusing on teaching and learning and the instructional leadership that they were hired for. And so it's a long way to say, I would love to figure out how we could become more efficient with the routes that we have. If we are missing 30 buses every afternoon, what does it take to take 30 buses off the road so we don't have a 30-minute shortage every single day? The other thing, we look at large cities just around the corner. New York City has worked on technology to inform parents minute-to-minute updates. Uber and Lyft have been doing it for decades, right? They alert you when the cars come in, right? They alert you when the car is going to be late or they took a wrong turn or something like that. I want to make sure that, we know we're improving our GPS and our data systems for families, but if that could go straight to families rather than having the parents, the principal and their staff responsible for making all those calls, I think it would be something I'm interested in. And then coming up with the plan B and a plan C, right? Plan A is get everybody to school on time. But aside from the buses just canceling out the routes, just say if a bus had a flat tire, what is the plan B to get those 30 kids that are now stranded at a school that ended at 4:10 home? Do we have other options on standbys in each neighborhood? Do we have a voucher system for parents to come to school if they don't have a car and pick their students up with some of our rideshare apps? I think we just need to look at different options. I honestly haven't been in all these operational conversations, but I have a lot of ideas in my head, just seeing the frustration and the stress of, number one, the parents, but number two, the staff that has to manage it. So I appreciate the question. I'm sure I didn't give you that exact answer that you want, but just a little glimpse into the thinking of what I would do to address transportation.
Perfect. Thank you for that. We have been collecting questions live throughout this panel using the Q&A function in Zoom. We will now ask a few of these questions live during our remaining time together. So the first question is, what are your views on receivership, how it would affect our students, and how we would get out of it if it happens, and how do you see your role as superintendent changing?
My views on receivership is not going to happen. We're not going to let it happen. I know that there was some news that just came out today, but I will work arm in arm with Mayor Wu to ensure that we are in as control of our district moving forward. Now, with that being said, I don't think it's just a 100% receivership, not receivership conversation. Some of the things that were brought up in the DESE review, maybe it's things that we need to take a deeper look at. We know that some of the issues that came up really centered on how we support our English learners, how we support our special education students, how we support our transformation schools. Our transformation schools are our lowest performing schools. They're performing at the lowest 10th percentile in the entire state. Like, there are things that we need to really address, but we need to address it together. All three of those categories I just mentioned, English learners, special education students, and transformation schools. There are students that are English learners and special education in those schools. So it's not looking at it separate. It's how does it all work together so we can move the work forward. I think one of the unfortunate results of going to work in Zoom all the time is this central office has become very, very siloed because we're literally stuck in these little boxes on computers. Before the pandemic, one of my leadership styles in central office is just running up and down the 6th floor building and talking to the people I need to talk to. And I think that personal touch, getting together, working with people, like, let's meet, these 3 departments need to work on one problem. That's something that I really want to bring to the table to show the state commissioner and the mayor that, look, we are addressing these things. But do I think that we should go to full restriction? No, absolutely not. I think that drastic move will disrupt a system that has already been disrupted. A lot of things that we have to address. But I think that we have the talent, we have the skills. We just need to rein it in, look at the main goals that are coming out of this report, or the goals that we established as a leadership team, and tackle those goals, deliver on those goals, implement the policies, implement the initiatives, and get results for our students. That's the only way we move forward, is delivering for our students and delivering for our parents.
Perfect. So the next question was also submitted through the live Q&A on Zoom. So some parents prefer a neurodiversity framework for their autistic child's education that focuses on acceptance and supportive accommodations. They're opposed to applied behavior analysis since they have heard that the autistic community considers ABA abuse. Currently, substantially separate classrooms for autistic students in BPS all embed ABA in their classroom. So they are called, quote unquote, ABA classrooms. Would you support BPS also offering neurodiversity classrooms as another classroom option?
Yeah, so one of my, when I was a school leader, I was definitely seen as more of the English language learner expert in our school community, in the entire zip code. I've learned a lot about special education, sub-separate inclusion from my assistant principals, my partners, my co-leaders, central office team members. This is something that I fully understand the importance of getting as specific as possible for the supports that we have in our students that we categorize in different programs. It's almost like our IEPs. Our IEPs, it's an individualized learning plan. And bucketing, as you mentioned in this question, bucketing students into one program or the other, knowing that there may be different variations of the support that needs to come with it. I would love to take a deeper look at it, what it looks like district-wide. Are there pairs, trios, small groups of students that may have some similarities in their IEP, as well as the desires of their parents to understand what type of supports they feel they need in our schools? But I welcome the conversation. This is something that I think is going to be part of, as we really rethink and retool and review what we're going to do with special education, will be one of the topics that comes up.
Awesome. This is Marcus speaking again. The next question was also submitted through the live Q&A. So it goes, I'm a parent at the Mario Umana School in East Boston. Our facilities, especially the parking lot, are in dire need of renovation. I recently saw that the system that schools are required to use to submit work requests, and saw that there are so many requests that are outstanding and nothing seems to get done in any sort of efficient manner. How would you change things to make our systems more efficient? And how would you identify the bottlenecks, and how would you work to dismantle them?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Betsy. This has been an issue that's evolved over time. I know our facilities team, under the leadership of Indy Alvarez, has got to a point. She's been on board for a year. We've cleaned up a lot of the systems that you had mentioned right here. The facilities requesting, I think in just the last 2 or 3 years, there's been different systems. I think we finally have the system that we are going to be using moving forward. I know that the facilities team is working with the mayor's team now and PFD, which is our public facilities department. I would love to see how issues like this, because a parking lot is a large system in itself. It's a big project. I know that there was some minor repairs in the Umana parking lot just the last couple months. And I remember the first time I took Indy out to the Umana parking lot, we stopped and she tripped in one of the potholes. So it is a priority. I would lean back to what it takes, the capacity we need to build within these teams to tackle all these issues. If we are doing a tremendous investment in our school facilities, it's not necessarily all the money going to new buildings. There's all these other systems we have to address. It makes me wonder what aspects of ESSER funding could maybe be used to improve school environments, which this may or not be qualified, but I would love to continue the conversation with the facilities team to understand, like, look, this has been a request for many years. What are we doing to get it done? Is there a timeline? Are there 5 parking lots in front of this one? And if so, are we going to clearly communicate with the parents and the school community when these things are going to get done, when we could expect it, and actually deliver by that date?
Awesome. Thank you for submitting that question. So the next one is, the number one priority of the school system is eliminating opportunity and achievement gaps. BPS has not been successful in reaching this goal. So what new strategies would you use, and what successful models have you developed in your region that could be applied throughout the district?
Yeah, this is a great question, Mr. Mudd. It goes back to the data conversation, and my team of school leaders is one that's very, very proficient in using data and data tools. The MAP assessment, NWA, is what we use. As soon as the assessments are up, people are asking for the reports, or because we've got they have access to the data, but there's kind of system level bird's eye view reports that come out. We just saw them coming up from the beginning of the year to the middle of the year reports, really digging into the understanding, not just school-wide what's happening, but also class-wide and in the individual groups of students. Something that's interesting that's coming out, and I fully 100%, and this is coming from a region, I break my region up into 3 different zip codes, but the 02128 zip code, which is East Boston, the largest percentage of English language learners. What we're seeing in the MAP growth data is typically we see kind of like a bell curve of how the students perform and how their growth looks. This year, more than ever, as our students come back to in-person learning, because now we're doing the actual assessment in the classrooms, it's becoming more of a valley. And the way we kind of are digesting is in certain classes, certain programs, students who are able to maintain their progress or just maintain through the pandemic and remote learning are the ones that are actually soaring at the higher levels right now. What's happening is the students who may have not had internet access or learning English online is a very difficult thing to do. Those students who came back, actually, even though if they were participating through remote learning, it was difficult to determine if any growth was happening. So what unfortunately we're seeing is this gap happening. So what we're doing using data and addressing that closing of the achievement gap is, how are we planning? This is a real example coming from Region 1. We met and said, how are we looking not only at small group station rotation time during our ELA block, but how are we planning to meet the specific needs of our students that are demonstrating these tremendous difficulties based off of our data to move them forward incrementally on our periodic assessments. The end of the year data just came in. We're still waiting for our district-wide kind of bird's eye view reports, which are really cool and really nuanced. But these things help plan our goals for next year, for next month. As we move forward, they inform our instructional focus, how each school is approaching their highest priority needs. And I'd love to welcome you to a more detailed conversation, Mr. Mudd. But it's really interesting to see how we are using data immediately to start planning for the next cycle.
Awesome. Thank you for submitting that question. So the next one is Dr. Welch. If chosen as superintendent, what would be the strategic plan that you would implement to achieve a comprehensive, fair, and equitable education reform for all, but also especially for English language learners and special education students?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. It goes back to something I mentioned earlier. There are 3 areas that I think that if we are really going to lead with equity in this district, we have to literally put our money where our mouth is. If we know that our schools that are experiencing the most challenges are our transformation schools. Not only do we need to support them in a way that is more than other parts of the district, we need to see exactly within those transformation schools, the support team in central office. How are we going to build up that team if we're really going to say, we're going to move this work forward? It's great to have the investments come into the schools. I mentioned this earlier. We have transformation coaches. We have family liaisons. But what I want to see is from the central office side, how are we helping these folks move the work forward? Because a lot of the successes I see are happening at the school level with leadership teams. It's not a systematic approach that I think that we can hang our hat on and say, we've done this and this is the results we got. Same thing with special education and English learners. All of these groups of students that are being supported by these departments are our most vulnerable learners, our most traditionally marginalized learners. If we're really going to lead with equity, we need to invest in the supports that we could provide these students, because that's the only way that we're going to get them to where we want to go.
Awesome. And we have about 6 minutes left. So we're going to go to the last question. And the question is simply, why Boston?
Why Boston? I think I mentioned this earlier with Mario's question. I'm a guy who's never wanted to take a superintendency job just to take a superintendency job. This is the city that I'm connected to. I've seen the great strengths of what's happening in our schools, as well as some of the challenges. Right now, I think this district needs someone who could literally hit the ground running, as the mayor said several times throughout the spring. And I am that guy. My entire schedule cleared out after July 1st. I want to get in. I want to especially meet the new principals that just got hired in the last couple of months. I want to get into those handful of schools that I haven't been in this year. But after that, going to, as the way I call them, the power brokers in the question with Danya earlier and Edith earlier, understanding where I need to go to the city, who I need to talk to, how do I understand what's happening in all parts of the city is something I would prioritize, because I do think that over time, it wasn't something that happened quickly in East Boston, Charleston, North End. The Elliott's rise took over a decade, right? East Boston has several schools that are finally hitting it. I think the 3 of the last 4 school in the moves come from this region. There's something to say about this team working together, sharing best practices, and sharing things like grants that they write together. This year was the first year that we started bringing in other school leaders and other regional superintendents like me to really understand what is happening, because something is happening, and we want to make sure that this spreads to the entire school district. I would love to be a part of that. And yeah, Boston's the only city that would do this. I would never go after a superintendent. The job's too hard to do it in a place that you don't care about.
Amazing. I want to appreciate our panelists for their thoughtful questions, to the public for your participation and engagement, and of course to Tommy Welch for spending your time with us today. You do have one more session though, so it's been a pretty long day for you. So the full schedule of public interviews can be found at bostonpublicschools.org/SUPT-search. I'm gonna say that again. The full schedule of public interviews can be found at bostonpublicschools.org/SUPT-search. We hope to see you again for the school committee interview this evening from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. And thank you and have a great rest of your day.